mid-filming. My phone ran out of storage space. Wow, I've got like a 60 gig phone. I need to take care of that. Okay, hey guys, what is up? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Kaylee. Today we are going over my November wrap-up, all the books I read in November, of which there were 17. We all know I like to talk a lot about books because what is the point of booktube if you're not actually discussing the things you read? So I will do my absolute best to make this as short and sweet as possible, but not skimp on the details. Also, my goal for November had been to read as many of the book subscription box books I've got as I could, and I read 5 1/4 of the 17, and a lot of the other books were new releases, which has been another goal of mine this year, is if I pre-ordered a book, I try and read it the month that it arrives, and I did a good job with that. 5, maybe 6, I can't remember if Ninth House came out in November. If it did, then that's 6 of the 17 are new releases as of November that I read in November. I don't know. I think that's pretty great. Let's get into it without further ado. Also, the ratings. I gave 1 book 2 stars, 3 book 3 stars, 3 books 3 stars, 8 books 4 stars, and 5 books 5 stars. I'm okay with that. That's a great reading month. Let's get into what was what and etc. Okay, bye. My first book, my number 2, is a sequel. It was highly anticipated for me. I buddy read it with my friend Jamie at Jamie Reads. I'll link her Bookstagram down below. One of my favorite reads earlier this year was Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nunn. Ooh. And I read the sequel, Girls of Storm and Shadow, and did not love it really much at all. I loved Lay so much in the first book, and the relationship that she had with her, the eventual, I don't want to give any spoilers away for the first book, but anyway, the relationship she eventually had, there was a lot of diversity and queer rep and really, really great, strong female characters in Girls of Paper and Fire. And the way that Girls of Paper and Fire ended was spectacular, and I loved it, and I couldn't wait for this book. And then this book felt entirely like a book that happened because publishing said you should probably have 3 in this series, not 2. It was completely unnecessary, in my opinion. I don't know why we always justify that, but if you're watching this channel, you know these are my opinions, and maybe someone loved this book, but it was not me. Neither did Jamie. This felt like a bridge to whatever's going to happen in the 3rd book. I think it was unnecessary. There were a lot more queer representation, a lot more diversity, but also I felt like it was a long trek and a long journey to get to the end of the book, and there wasn't even like a climax that made the story worth it. There were deaths that I didn't care about because the characters weren't developed enough for me to really care. I found one character incredibly annoying, and the voice felt forced. And then when that character was no more, there was another character that swoops in, like a new one, to take their place as the most annoying person in the book. And I just did not enjoy my time with it. I read it to finish it after the first, 1/3 was a slog. I just kind of sped through to have it done. And my dear friend Jamie felt the same way, so I wasn't alone. And it really sucks. I feel like I always give books I buddy read a higher rating because I've had so much fun reading it. It just wasn't the case for this, unfortunately, so womp womp. Next up, I went through a slew of audiobooks this month. I read so many audiobooks. It was fantastic. That's why my numbers are so high. This is probably one of the highest reading months I've ever had. It helped me get through my Book of the Month Club books too, which is great. And the next one is Hello Girls by Brittany Cavallaro and Emily Henry. I gave this 3 stars. It was an interesting ride, but I didn't connect with any of the characters. Which was my main complaint. So if you can't connect with the characters, then you can't really give a shit about what's happening to them. So the main 2 girls in this story, one lives with an abusive father who is small town famous, and enough so that she can't come out about the abuse and she doesn't have a mother. Her mother died. Wait, I don't want to spoil anything. She just lives with her father. She thinks that if she tells anybody about what he does, that no one will believe her. So she tries to just kind of live her life until she can get away. She wants to go to Chicago. She meets her unlikely friend in this girl that's from a poor family, and she also has a lot of bad shit going on in her life. Her mom is kind of apathetic. Her brother sells drugs and like tries to pull her into it and like blackmails her and stuff. Her life is just kind of crap too. So they're each other's like solace. And they decide one day, that's it. They're done. They're just gonna leave. And they go on this road trip and a lot of crazy shit happens to them on this road trip. It's like a Bonnie and Clyde retelling more or less, or at least it's rooted in that. And again, I just didn't connect with the characters. The abusive dad was like the most that got me emotionally, and it didn't make me care more about his daughter. I just wasn't feeling it, and I wanted to. I really like Emily Henry and what I've read of Brittany Cavallaro, but it just wasn't for me. My next number 3 is a book that I really expected to love, and just, it was okay. I had a good time with it, but all right. It's Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi. This is a story about a boy that works in a convenience store, and one day this girl comes in and buys stuff and they have like an instant connection, and it turns out that she's this famous pop star. They basically immediately fall for each other. They like can't stop thinking about each other. He doesn't immediately know who she is, but he figures it out. And then they kind of date for a while, and the tone of this story was really fun and I liked his voice. So Pablo is who you see the story through the eyes of, and his voice is very specific and very youthful, and I think it was well done. There's a lot of pop culture references to like designer labels like sneakers and Supreme and that kind of stuff. And he runs this Instagram that mashes up both sneakers and snacks, and he prides himself on his like ability to put together really interesting, unique snacks. And his Instagram is relatively famous, but it gets even more famous when Liana, the pop star, has like tagged him in something or like commented on something that he posted. And they kind of have this like secret relationship. He's not allowed to bring it up to his friends because of the contract that he had to sign with her, etc. But their like whirlwind romance was very, very hard for me to believe. So if you don't mind suspending your belief about romances and how fast it is, which I guess in your youth is typical, but not when you're like a famous, worldwide famous pop star. You don't just pick some guy up at like a convenience store. It was a very like Your Name story, and I can see how it was fun, but there was just a lot of facets to her side of things that I didn't believe it. As someone who really is a fan of pop culture and celebrities, clearly, you know me, I just don't see a lot of what happened happening. It just doesn't make sense to me. And it really took me out of the story when things like that happened. So it was good, and maybe you'll like it if you don't mind those kinds of things, suspending your belief, but it just wasn't for me. My next and final 3-star is another well-loved book on BookTube, but I've never been quiet about how I'm not one of the people that absolutely love this series, and that is Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. This was a gift mid-filming. My phone ran out of storage space. Wow, I've got like a 60 gig phone. I need to take care of that. Okay, so anyway, Queen of Nothing, Holly Black, the final. A good friend of mine, a dear, dear friend of mine, gifted this to me. It was not a book that I was going to pre-order because the previous 2 books in the series were like generously 4 stars for me. And this was a 3-star. I think it was rushed. I never bought into Jude and Carden the way that the rest of BookTube that really loves this series did, and I think that that's where it falls short for me. I do really like Carden as like the person that he's supposed to play in this story, but I don't know, the end, everyone was worried about how short it was, and yeah, the end of what had been like a really hyped series just kind of fell a little flat for me. The book goes in and out of like modern world and fairy world, and I feel like it could have been played with more than it actually was, especially with how it ended. And for that, I mean, it's fine. It's a good series, especially if you really liked the first one. You'll like carrying on, but I don't know. It just wasn't my series. It wasn't not my series either. A good 3 stars, solid in the middle. Okay, so I had 8 4-stars, and the first 4 stars were all thrillers that I just listened to because I had a free trial of Scribd, and if you use Scribd, you know that typically you get about 3 good, like, new and highly hyped books for your month, but then once you've read them, it like really narrows down what you can listen to. So between that and Hoopla, I read a couple thrillers that I've been meaning to get to, and I love listening to thrillers on audiobook because, I don't know, there's just like, it's someone telling you a story. I love ghost stories, that kind of shit, so it makes sense. I read The Death of Mrs Westaway? I can't remember the name. Anyway, I'll have it up here, by Ruth Ware. This is, I feel personally it's one of her like more known titles. This is a story about a woman who gets a letter in the mail saying that someone in her life has died, like an old person that wants to bequeath her money. And she's like, I don't know who this person is, but I'm so broke and I owe bookers money, and I am gonna just go and pretend that I am the person that this letter thinks I am and inherit some money. And a bunch of shenanigans ensue because she's playing this role in this family that's fighting over what the will of Mrs. Westaway left behind, especially because this girl that they don't know has gotten a very good deal out of the whole thing. And it's just a crazy woven story. I did see the end coming about halfway through, and it was a little bit longer than it needed to be. And in the end, I didn't care enough about the main character to really feel for her, but some shit does go down and it is very fascinating. The last half of it was pretty exciting. So I gave it a 4 stars. I didn't think it was the worst thing I've ever read. So it is the lowest 4 star though, so it's more like a high 3.5. I took the worst notes for this, so you'll have to excuse me because I completely forgot the author's name for this book, but I read The Silent Patient. It was very hyped, and I know that Book of the Month had it, and that's, I think, where I first saw it. This is a story about a woman whose husband is murdered, and she is accused of doing the crime, committing the crime, but she's gone completely mute since his death. And so she is in a psych ward, and you're seeing it from the perspective of her diary in the past, and current day, one of the psychologists that works in her psychiatric unit is determined to figure out why she's gone mute and what really happened. Again, another story that, okay, let me say this without spoilers. There are multiple twists at the end, and one of them really surprised me, and the other one I saw coming. So that's where I got a 4 star. If the one that surprised me hadn't happened, it would have been a lower rated story because I just feel like it was, I don't like unreliable narrators, and it gave me a Gone Girl kind of vibe because of the journal. So I didn't feel like it was particularly unique, but I did really enjoy it, and it is a debut novel, so I'm excited to see Alex Michaelides. Is that his name? As it just comes to me randomly. It is a debut novel, so I'm excited to see what happens in future thrillers from this author because I thought it was really well written and the narrator was great. I also listened to an audiobook. I think I mentioned this in the beginning. So that's that. Good 4 star thriller. Then I read Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. She's been getting a lot of hype lately for a different novel, I can't remember, but this is one of her, I'd say, more well-known books. It's a very interesting story. It's told through the perspective of a woman who has 3 daughters, and one of them, is it 3 daughters? No, she has 2 daughters and a son, and the middle daughter goes missing one day, and after years, it has just been considered a runaway case, and she never comes back, and the woman and her husband divorce over it, and her children, her existing children, kind of like leave her life, and she still, obviously, as you wouldn't as a parent, she can't get over the fact that her daughter went missing, and all these years she's never believed it was a runaway case, and she just wants closure. She wants to know what happened. She ends up, for the first time in all the years that she's been divorced, meeting a guy, and they start dating, but her kids think something is weird. The story was really great. I didn't fully see the end coming, but they also, Lisa doesn't try and hide where the story's going. So it wasn't like she was trying to be like, you didn't see this coming, did ya? It was just a really fucked up story, and I really enjoyed it. It's a weird word to use for a thriller about a young girl that goes missing, which is like one of the worst fears of my life, is that something like that would happen to my kid and I just wouldn't know. Closure is really important for the human psyche, and it was a very fascinating read to get to that. The end was a little anticlimactic, but I also think it worked with the story. So it was a pretty solid 4-star read. And then the last in the line of thrillers that I listened to on audiobook, I did read The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I liked this a heck of a lot more than I liked The Death of Miss Westaway. This, they're both 4 stars. This is a story about a woman who is a nanny, and she gets a job to nanny for this family that's a little bit odd. There's 3 girls, and the house is a smart house. So she's like out of her element. She doesn't know how to use basically anything in this house. And you know at the very, very beginning that one of the kids is dead and that she's been blamed and she's in jail, and she's writing letters to somebody she wants to represent her in the case to get her out of jail, because she is adamant that she did not kill one of the kids. You don't know which kid it is. You don't know what happens. So you hear these stories, and then she goes back from the beginning when she first applies for the job and tells the story. And I thought it was really, really fascinating. The reason it wasn't a 5-star is because the ending, the reasoning, how it happened was kind of rushed, and everything else that came up to it was a whole, it almost felt like a whole separate story until the end. But again, it was one of those things I didn't see coming, and I really appreciated reading it. And I do want to read more Ruth Ware. This is my 3rd, which includes The Death of Miss Westaway that I read this month. I've read The Woman in Cabin 10 and didn't really care for it, but I do want to read more of Ruth Ware's stuff, as well as Lisa Jewell's, and see, you know, what they have to offer. Then I read Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. This was part of my mini contemporary-thon TBR, and this is a book I've been meaning to read for a very long time, so I was glad that my hold on my library's audiobook came in like right before the mini contemporary-thon started, so it was perfectly timed, and I listened to it in like 2 days. It's a very cool story about almost like a podcast. There's like a show called University, and it's just about like the 2 or 3 kids that are involved in this and how it's anonymous, but just kids dealing with a lot of, I talked a lot about it in my mini contemporary-thon, so I don't want to go too far into it. If you want to watch the vlog, I'll have that link down below as well. But for the sake of how long this is going to be, my wrap up, I'm going to cut it off there. It was pretty good. 4-star. There's a lot of trigger warnings. I talk about them all in my vlog. Good, and I'm glad I read it, and I would like to read the rest of Alice Oseman's stuff at some point. Then I listened to Wicked Fox by Cat Cho. Finally, I've had this on so many TBRs this past year, like so many, and I just never got to it. I finally listened to it on audiobook. This is a Korean-inspired fantasy that takes place in Seoul. It's like an urban fantasy about a girl who is the 9-tailed fox, aka Gumiho, and in order to sustain her life, she needs to eat men. And it's about her and her like wicked mother and shamans and a boy that falls in love with her and tries to help her when she loses her like life stone. And I liked it. I gave it a very solid 4-star. It was a little bit like cheesy and like a little, I never like to say like it read very YA, but it did read very YA. And I'm pretty sure this is Cat Cho's debut novel, and I'm like 99% sure this is the start of a series, so I'm excited to see what happens in the future. But I really, really did enjoy this. I've seen mixed reviews. People either really loved it or didn't love it, and I was pleasantly surprised. I put it off and put it off because I was afraid I wouldn't like it, but I ended up liking it, so 4 stars. Next up was a book. I have a tumultuous past with this author because I've really loved one of their works, and then the rest I've either DNF'd or not cared as much for, but this is their first adult work, and if you've seen past vlogs, you'll know who I'm talking about, because I really anticipated liking this simply because so many people that loved their past works weren't really digging this. So I was like, maybe in my brain of brains, that means that I'll really like it since I didn't really dig her past work. And that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is a story about a secret society at Galaxy North, a girl who can see greys, and greys are ghosts, basically, in layman's terms. The secret societies all have some kind of specific magic they can do, and it was just really, really fascinating. It does move a little slow. It is very much a build-up story, but I just liked the idea behind it. Really was how strong women can be despite all of the shit that's thrown at them and the expectations placed on them and the assumptions men make about weaknesses and unintelligence and all of that kind of thing, and how like in order to get through, you really need to lean on other women as a woman. And I really appreciated all of that, and I really can't wait to see what happens to Alex North in future projects, as this is the first of a series, and I'm really pleased that I liked it. I was afraid once I started getting into it and it was reading slow that I would hate it, but I didn't. Very solid 4 stars. And my last 4-star is a book that I really expected to not love, and I absolutely loved it, and that is Frankly in Love by David Yoon. I don't know, I think because it was so hyped up, and what's it called? The PR for it was like huge, and honestly I've read his wife Nicola Yoon's Everything and didn't really love it, so for some reason in my head I was like, I bet they write similarly because they're married, but that doesn't mean anything. I loved this. Frank is a Korean-American boy who has parents that came straight from Korea, and he basically spends this whole book struggling with himself and his identity because though he is Korean-American, he doesn't speak Korean. His parents do though, and he's not fully white, so he doesn't feel like he is an American either. Not that white makes you American, but that's the struggle he's having. Like, he's not just a regular average American. So the whole book is a struggle with finding oneself, especially as like a foreigner, dealing with racism, both racism against him and racism in his own home. The whole story is about how his parents want him to date a Korean girl or a Korean American girl, and he is dating a white girl secretly, so he sets up with one of his parents' Korean friend's daughter. They all have like group meals every week together, who is also dating someone of another race. I believe he was Chinese. They decide to fake date, which turns into more, which gets kind of messy, and I don't know, I just really liked it. Frank's voice was funny, and it was very youthful and much like Permanent Record, except I felt like this character had a lot more depth and the things that happened were a lot more believable. And in the end, I just really absolutely enjoyed my time with this book, and I would recommend it. And the audiobook was really good too. The guy that did, I can't remember his name, something Lee, that did the narration, did a really good job with it. So highest 4-star of the month. And now we're on to 5 stars. The first one I will throw up is a reread, and you guys know that if I reread a book that I've loved in the past, I put it on the bottom of my 5 stars. That doesn't mean it's the bottom of my 5 stars. But I finally got to Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray. This was a book that was supposed to be read for the read-along that Chelsea, Melanie, Madeline, and Jane did, and I was like on track with them up until this, and the audiobook didn't come in on time, and I wanted to hear it via audiobook because the narrator is just phenomenal. I've said it again and again, and you've probably heard it before, but this is the 3rd in the series, so I obviously won't get into it. And if you've been here a while, you know that The Diviners is one of my favorite series ever, and I cannot wait for February for the conclusion to it. But yeah, I won't get any further into this. You know what it's about, or you don't, and you should read it. Next is another one of my pre-orders, one that I always pre-order the next volume of because I just love it. It's such a cute little story, and that is Space Boy Volume 5 by Stephen McCraney. This was an interesting story because I've complained in the past, I think Volume 4, that I was getting a little, not annoyed, but like I'm ready to hear more about Oliver's, the Space Boy's story, and there's just not enough yet. It's just sprinkled in, and this does get a little bit more into it. There's also some like character conflict amongst 2 of the main girl characters, and just a lot of like growth and discovery of the characters within the story in this. They're very short and very low in terms of text. It's a lot of art, and the art is really, I just really like the art style. So this is a 5-star read. It reads incredibly young, like could be middle grade level, but I'm loving it so much. And I love, you can't see it in frame, but the spines all line up to make a picture, and sold. Next on my list is a book that I thoroughly enjoyed, and when it comes to contemporary adult romance, I am a very hard person to please. This is a total 5-star book for me though, and that is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is a story about a woman who has a near-death experience and thus writes a list of things she wants to accomplish in her life because she feels like she hasn't done enough with her life. She also suffers from fibromyalgia, and so it's an own voices representation because she's also a Black woman, and Talia Hibbert is both a Black woman and has fibromyalgia. This story was so freaking cute, and the love interest, Redford, so he goes by Red, is like the maintenance guy in her apartment, and what I expected from and didn't get out of Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey, with like the romance and the dirty talk, was everything in this book. This is exactly what I wanted out of Fix Her Up and got in Get a Life, Chloe Brown. The characters have depth, they have emotion, you want things to work for each of them individually and together. If you haven't read it or listened to it, I highly recommend it. I did listen to it on audiobook. The narrator is great. I didn't want to stop listening to it till I was finished. Highly, highly recommend it. And coming from me, I feel like that's big with adult contemporary romances, so check it out. All right, guys, hang in. We're on the final two. My favorite books of the month. Both of them are pre-orders. Both of them were highly anticipated. I'm very pleased to say that they both followed through. They both came through, and that is Call Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater. You all know the Raven Cycle is one of my favorite series of all time, and Ronan Lynch is one of my favorite characters in this series. So to have a spin-off book that follows Ronan Lynch and his brothers was like a dream come true when Maggie announced it, and I've been anticipating it since the first hint dropped, and it met expectations. This is a story that happens post the Raven Cycle. You do get intermittent moments with the characters that are in the Raven Cycle, but they're very far and few between. So this is almost solely about Ronan Lynch and his older brother Declan Lynch and his younger brother Matthew Lynch. And in the Raven Cycle, I didn't care for Declan at all, and that was purposeful. That was what was supposed to be the case. But in this book, that all changes. Declan has a lot on his shoulders. This is a story basically about dreaming and pulling things from dreams, and Ronan trying to exist as a human being while still having these powers that are basically killing him if he goes outside of his geographical location. And a lot of stuff goes down in this, so I don't want to get into it, especially if you haven't read the Raven Cycle. I think you could go into this without reading the Raven Cycle, though I do not recommend it because there's a lot of background in here that play into this a little bit. But you're introduced to a lot of new characters, and they're really cool, and the storyline for them is very cool. But basically, these people are being hunted. The Dreamers are being hunted by a group of other people, and there's multiple stories happening at once. And how this ended makes me really, really want the second book. Did not disappoint, 5-star read. And my absolute favorite book of the month, which is always hard for me to pick, but I buddy read this with my girl Lacey over at Lacey DeBell, and that is The Toll by Neal Shusterman. I'm actually seeing some mixed reviews on this. Some people think it's underwhelming. I did not think it's underwhelming. I think that Neal Shusterman wrapped it up perfectly. For a 640-page book, I think it is, I expected it to drag because Thunderhead, which is the second book in the Scythe series, dragged a lot, especially in the first half, and then the second half was epic and full of a lot of happenings, and it was just, it went from a 3-star book to like a 4.5-star book for me, based solely on the end of Thunderhead. I was afraid the same thing would happen in The Toll, that it would drag and then things would happen, but no, there was just so much to wrap up, and you follow so many different characters, both on the good side and the bad side, and we have new characters, we have a non-binary character, so there's new representation, and I can't think of a better way to have ended this trilogy. Honestly, it might not have been as action-packed as some people wanted, which I guess is why maybe people didn't enjoy it, but I think that everything that happened had a point, had a purpose. Lacey and I were texting each other like multiple times a day, every day. I think we even read this a little faster than we anticipated, because at some points we just couldn't put it down, and we'd end on these like cliffhangers, some chapters, and it was so good. If you haven't picked up the Scythe series, you probably should. If you're sleeping on finishing it, you probably should. I absolutely loved it. I'm so glad that 2 of my highly anticipated books of the year completely blew my mind, and I'm really happy about that. So that is it for me, 17 books. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you've read any down below and what you thought of them. Let me know if I have swayed you to read any of these. let me know what your favorite book was in November. Thanks for sticking around, guys. I tried to do my best and keep it as short as possible. I hope that I was successful. Thanks for being here, guys. I hope your December is going well. I hope that your year of reading has been a great year, and I will see you in the next one. Like if you've liked this video, subscribe if you're new here and want to see more content from me. I post all my social media links down below. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads. I will see you in the next one, guys. Bye.